Hi everyone. Hope you can hear me okay. Don't quite know how you can let me know, but if maybe post something up in the chat if you can hear me, just so that I know this is all working as we expect. Hopefully you're all expecting the same thing today. So as you can see from the slide that's being presented, this is around a quick whistle stop tour on business continuity and disaster recovery with Azure. What we're going to touch on today is a little bit around the sort of the principles of BCDR, and then some of the technologies in Azure that help and can support you through that as well. My name's Andy Skipper. I work for a company called Cloud Direct, and we're a Azure Expert MSP. We work hand in hand with Microsoft and helping customers to design, build, utilize cloud services, primarily Azure, and help customers manage their estates as well. I'm not going to dwell too much on us and whatever else. I'm going to get into the content. There's just a little bit on the slides around who we are and what we do. So straight off into business continuity and disaster recovery challenges. As you're probably aware, with an estate, and whether you're running an estate in Azure, whether you're running a estate in on premises, there are a number of challenges around business continuity and disaster recovery, and they stem from a number of different sources. So from cyber attacks through to simple technology failure, through to compliance and regulations that stipulate things must be protected in certain ways. And that landscape, certainly within the cyberspace and with the technology space, is constantly evolving as well. So it's very difficult to keep on top of what's going on. But to you and your businesses, the disruption that an event can cause, a disaster can cause, it could be fairly catastrophic. And we've seen instances of that. You go through any year, probably for the past 10 years, and you'll find you can pick out instances where businesses have truly suffered because of not having robust business continuity and disaster recovery plans in place. The starting point for any business continuity and disaster recovery is about understanding your requirements. So whoever's on this call, you've got different estates. They will look completely different from one to the other in terms of IT. You've got completely different businesses. They will function and work in completely different ways from one to the other. So any business continuity and disaster recovery strategy and plan must start with understanding your estate, B, your business requirements, and C, you must have a comprehension of the scenarios that you're trying to cater for. In terms of those scenarios, what are you trying to protect against? Consider things like system failures. So a particular component of a system fails, a particular piece of data is corrupted, those types of things. You can then sort of start looking wider from that point on. So what happens if my data center has some form of catastrophic failure? What happens if my Azure region has some form of catastrophic failure? And then you've got those things that maybe sit outside a little bit around of the IT space that may well impact. So very obviously the very obvious one in recent times has been there was a pandemic, which means that your office space can no longer be used. So how are you coping in those types of situations? You've also then got things like cyber attacks. So and that they could be external, denial of service attacks, someone trying to hack you, extract your data, ransomware, those types of things. But also they could be internal as well. So you may have a malicious person within your organization that is trying to do you some form of harm, people who are accidentally giving away passwords, those types of things. And then the one that's sort of slightly overlooked sometimes is the supply chain piece as well. So you'll all have third-party software within your estates. You'll all have reliance on suppliers to support and maintain various elements of your systems. So how does that factor into your BCDR plan? You know, how robust are their plans? So it's very key to understand what you're trying to protect against and what scenarios you're considering, because some of these can drive significant costs. Some of those can be dealt with in a fairly simple way. So once you've got your scenarios, you then have to think about how those scenarios apply to the systems and the requirements that sit around those systems. So when I talk about systems, you might think about workloads that you've got sat within Azure, within your on-prem DCs, something that provides some form of business service. So understanding which of those systems are critical to your business is very key. You're not going to want to protect and have a BCDR plan that protects a non-business critical system in the same way that protects a business critical system. You're going to put much more emphasis on that business critical system. Around that business criticality, you also got to think about whether there are contractual commitments, SLAs. You may provide systems to other parties, to your customers. You know, are there anything within those contractual terms that means you must meet particular service level agreement or availability target, that type of thing? And there might be penalties if you don't. So again, that has to be factored in and understood. Then also RPO and RTO. So again, RPO, RTO, I'll come on to a little bit more. So recovery time objective and recovery point objective are very key in understanding and defining the requirements around a particular system. And I'll come on to those a little bit more in a second. You also have to consider non-production systems. So while you're focused and your business critical systems will be production, there may be other elements. You may have test systems, you may have development systems that need to be considered and protected, because ultimately it may stop. You know, for example, if your development system has a disaster, it may stop productivity and development of new products. Hopefully that makes sense, but understanding your BCDR requirements are key for how then you deal with them at a technical level. In terms of business continuity, sort of three key areas: to disaster recovery, backup, and high availability. So disaster recovery is around recovering from you've had some form of disaster. How quickly can you recover from that disaster, and how quickly do you need to recover from that disaster? It could be a component failure. It could be a whole region or DC failure. It could be that a system is unavailable for some other reason, maybe a cyber attack, something like that. You have backup. So this is about protecting your data, not necessarily your system, but it gives you caters for a different type of disaster. So you may have a corrupted data that has been there for a period of time, and you need to understand how you're going to recover from that. It's not sort of an immediate something you may immediately notice. So you have you back up data and you retain that data for a length of time. And then you have high availability. So for those truly business critical systems where if they're down for any number of minutes or hours, your business is going to suffer. Then you may well consider high availability. So having the ability for your system not to be affected if certain components fail. And as you can imagine, that's fairly can be fairly costly, but it's all tied back to that recovery point objective and recovery time objective. Just a little bit more around that difference between high availability and disaster recovery. So with high availability, you have something that is always active. So if you have a component failure, if you have a problem with your system, then you have a similar component ready, waiting, sat there to take over straight away. So there's very little downtime. Something that's always available. But on the negative side, effectively you're running almost 2 systems or 3 systems to cater for that. With disaster recovery, you have a little more leeway. So it could be an active standby type system that you may have seen before. So again, it's for important workloads you really care about, but that maybe don't have the same impact on your business if they go down. As I said about RPO and RTO, so this is fairly critical when you're understanding your requirements and your business requirements. So RPO, so recovery point objective, it's the effectively the maximum amount of data that you can lose in the case of a disruption. So for example, if you have a workload, if that workload goes down and it takes you an hour to bring that workload back up again, sorry, wrong example, that's RTO. So with RPO, if say you're taking a backup of your data on a 24-hour basis, your RPO for that system, your recovery point objective, the maximum amount of data you can lose if that system goes down and you need to restore from that backup would be 24 hours. So RPO is and it can be you can have 0 RPO ranging all the way up to 72 a week, whatever makes sense. For most non-business critical systems, 24 hours is about where you should be looking for an RPO, and then it goes down, scrolls down from there as the systems become more critical. And then RTO is the recovery time objectives. How long does it take you to bring that system back up? How long does it need to take you to bring that system back up? How long can it be out for? So in the the event of a disaster where your workloads have gone down and it takes you an hour to bring them back up, whether in the same data center, in another region in Azure, wherever it might be, then effectively your RTO for that is 1 hour. And generally the shorter those timeframes are, the RPO and RTO, the more it's going to cost you within Azure, on-prem, whatever you do it, because you're going to need more systems and more backups, more disaster recovery solutions to cater for it. But it's a very good way, RPO, RTO, of defining how critical your solutions are. And each solution probably, you need to be looking at the RPO and RTO for each of those based on the business expectation, technically what you can afford to spend, any contractual SLAs, any compliance regulations that you're trying to cater for. Hopefully that makes sense. So as with most IT projects, most things you need to be considering, you should really look at the requirements to start with. What I'm going to cover off now is just a quick run through of some of the technologies within Azure that can help meet some of the BCDR requirements that you may have. Just before we go on from there, just let's see if there's any questions. Well, no questions, that's good. Oh no, Corey and I, sorry, I'm looking at the wrong tab. Oh no, that was Adam posting things up. Yeah, I mean, if anyone's got any questions, please put them in the Q&A, and I'll either deal with them as we go through, or we'll probably have a bit of time at the end where I can just talk through and try and address those. In terms of Azure technology that can help you, so again, just to reiterate, you really should be bringing us back understanding what your requirements are in terms of your BCDR space, and the technology that I'm going to talk about here helps you achieve those requirements. But without understanding what those requirements are in the first place, you may be over engineering things, you may be using products that aren't quite suitable and won't meet what you're trying to achieve. So with one of the sort of primary tools within Azure for BCDR and really ticking that backup box, that protection of data box, is Azure Backup. So Azure Backup is a PaaS service within Azure. It effectively integrates with the Azure ecosystem, can integrate as well, and I'll come to that again in a little more detail in a second, with your on-premise state, and effectively allows you a single place where you can define, take backups of your data. It's simple, it's secure, so it's tied into the sort of role-based access control models within the Azure space. So you can limit who can see it. You can control the who has access and what they can do. Um, it's cost effective. It's costs less than most on-prem backup solutions, to be honest. And it obviously makes use of the underlying Azure storage layer to store your data. So again, you haven't got that concern around running out of space. Um, it operates at scale. I would always recommend it to anyone using Azure or migrating into Azure, and even those who are still within that sort of that hybrid space and making use of data centers. And it has diverse workload support as well. So it protects not just virtual machines, but a range of other products that exist as well, which I'm going to come to again in a second. So it's as I say, just to stress, it's safe and secure. It provides your safeguards your backup data, as it says here. It's starts to and plays into that zero trust model, role-based access control, making sure the right people have the right access. It alerts. It provides an element of protection from ransomware. So you have the ability to store not just let's say you're running a system within Azure within a particular region. You can use Azure Backup, and you can store those backups off-site. You can store those backups in a separate region. For me, you're not fully protected. It's not a true backup solution unless your backups are stored somewhere where your original data isn't sat. Again, it comes back to those disaster scenarios that you're trying to protect against. So if you're talking about like a full region failure, and it could be, you use your imagination here about what could cause a complete region failure. It could be something fairly catastrophic, an explosion, whatever that might be. You don't want your backup data sat in the same place as your main data. So you have that ability with Azure Backup to geo-replicate between regions, which is very good. You also have the ability to make those backups immutable, which provides you some excellent protection against ransomware. The problem with ransomware and with a lot of the cyber attacks that are going on these days are that the people perpetrating this are very clever. They not only go after they'll exploit the systems that they can get access to, and they'll encrypt the data that's on that. They'll also go after your backup systems. They'll see what's on those particular virtual machines. They'll understand the access they have to your wider estate, and they will go after your backups as well. If it was just as simple to restore from a backup, then the ransomware would not be would not be the problem that it is, which is why making backups immutable is fairly key as a form of ransomware protection, because it means once that backup's been taken, it's immutable. It can't be changed. It can't be encrypted as part of some wider cyber attack. Okay, I mentioned before that it's Azure Backup also protects against diverse workloads. Also helps back up diverse workloads. So I've talked a little bit around virtual machines, but it can also work at the database layer. So SQL, Postgres. If you're making use of some of the file systems within Azure, so Azure Files, blob storage, all of those types of things, it can all help and protect those. So it takes backups of those. You have full control over things like granularity, retention periods, that type of thing. The last one that I've not mentioned there is the on-prem servers, but I'll come to that in a sec. And just to tie it back to what I was talking about before, so recovery point objective and recovery time objective. So based on the type of backup that's being taken and what's being protected, It provides you with slightly different levels of RPO and RTO. So you can see here, for example, Azure virtual machines. If you're protecting a virtual machine, you're taking a full backup every 24 hours. Then that effective your recovery point objective would be 24 hours. The recovery time objective, how long does it take to restore from that backup? It depends on the size of the virtual machine and how much data you're effectively pulling across. But it could be an hour, it could be slightly longer depending on the size of that virtual machine. And in terms of retention, you obviously have full control over how long you retain that data for. For those of you who are maybe a bit more familiar with some of the sort of the old school type approaches, the son, father, grandfather type approaches, then all of that is possible. You can retain, you can have weekly backups retained for a month, monthly backups retained for 6 months, yearly backups retained for X amount of time. That type of thing is all possible with Azure Backup. And the last one I just want to touch on here is that Azure Mars one at the end. So Mars is Microsoft Azure Recovery Services. It's an agent, so effectively you can back up to your on-prem servers into Azure Backup. So effectively your Azure becomes your off-site backup repository. And the RPO and RTO is defined there, but obviously that some of that is defined by how quickly the network is that exists between you and Azure as well. But it does satisfy quite a lot of compliance and regulatory requirements about where data is stored and how well it's protected. You can make it immutable. You don't have to sit there and worry about running out of disk space and things like that. But it also leads me on to another product that's quite useful, especially ideally suited for that hybrid estate, which is Azure Arc. So Azure Arc allows you to effectively extend a number of different services from Azure into your estate, into the rest of your estate. So predominantly on-prem, but if you've got elements in AWS, you've got elements in Google Cloud, Azure Arc provides you with that ability, that single pane of glass, to protect not only what's in Azure, but also what's in those other systems as well. And one of the elements of that is Azure Backup. So with that Mars agent, once it's configured, you can effectively bring those virtual machines under the Azure Arc banner, and it allows you to back those up to the same place you're backing up your Azure, provide you a single pane of glass so you can see, you get a holistic view across your entire estate. With Azure Arc, it also touches on you allow other services as well. So you can see some of those here. So Azure Policy, some of the vulnerability assessment pieces you can do, and then also allows you to expand out into your with your SIEM tooling, threat detection, that type of thing. So again, providing that single pane of glass, an approach for both your Azure estate and your other elements that sit elsewhere as well. Not going to dwell too much on those other elements, those SIEM and threat and whatever, because not quite the subject for this. So, but some benefits of Azure Arc. Again, I'm not going to go through these in too much detail, but ultimately it helps you just to bring everything together. The one thing I would stress is that it allows you to extended security updates, to push out extended security updates to the Windows Server 2012 that are effectively end of life from an operating system perspective, and SQL Server 2012 as well. In terms of the sort of deployment thing for Arc, so Azure Backup, the reason I haven't talked about deployment of Azure Backup effectively is that it's inbuilt, and it is, it's a PaaS system that exists within Azure. It's very straightforward and easy to set up. With Azure Arc, because you're effectively extending that from Azure into your on-prem environment, it's a little bit more. There's a little bit more to it. But if you have an Azure presence, then effectively you create a network link between the two. You onboard your virtual machines that are on-prem into Azure Arc, and then you can deploy security updates, create backups. Have that single pane of glass. And the last piece of technology, the key piece of technology I'm going to talk about as part of this, is Azure Site Recovery. So Azure Site Recovery, you think of it as a Badget as a DR tool. So we talked about backups, we've talked about protecting data, retaining it for a certain period of time, and allowing you to restore that data from that backup. Now, Azure Site Recovery is something that's slightly different. Azure Site Recovery effectively takes once you've configured Azure Site Recovery, and it's generally between regions in Azure, but it can be from on-site into Azure as well. Once that's set up, effectively what happens is every time a change is made to a virtual machine, that change is asynchronously replicated to a managed disk, a target disk within that secondary region. So it doesn't create a virtual machine, but it's any changes it's replicating across. So effectively creates almost like a journal file and a target disk that is there ready to use. So where this has sort of benefits over backup is that your RPO, your recovery point objective, is very small. If you think of every change you're making is being replicated. It's asynchronously, says that the rate of data change can have an impact, but it's being replicated to the opposite, to the other region. The amount of data you could possibly lose if that primary server goes down is actually very small. You're talking 10 minutes, outside an hour, if your rate of data change is very large. It's asynchronously replicating, is going across the fast Microsoft backbone network, and effectively what you're sat with on your secondary site is a target disk that is sat there ready to go, and as near as damn it, similar, identical to the one that's on the primary site. It's replicated asynchronously, so there's no performance hit on your source disk. You're not waiting for some form of confirmation that your data's been replicated onto the opposite side. But in the event of a disaster, you then have the ability, or actually for test reasons as well, so you can do this in a bit more of a controlled fashion. If there is a disaster, you can take that target disk that's sat on the other side using Azure Site Recovery and spin that up and create a virtual machine with that. So Azure Site Recovery is very good when your target RPO and RTO is smaller. It's much smaller. Where 24 hours wouldn't cut it, for example, which is probably what we're looking at with a backup. So if you've got something that is more business critical, and you need it, you need to lose very little data out of it. And you need to spin it up very quickly, so that the downtime is reduced, the RTO is reduced. Then Azure Site Recovery is the way to go. It's not a backup tool though. So what it won't do is it won't provide you with the ability to restore data from a week last Thursday. If it is primarily focused as a disaster recovery tool. And it is a complete solution. So you can not only protect your virtual machines in Azure, you can protect your virtual machines that are sat on-prem as well. So if you're running VMware, Hyper-V, any of those types of solutions on-prem, then you can leverage ASR to replicate those virtual machines in a near real-time fashion into Azure, and then when it comes to it, if you have a problem with your data center, you can effectively spin up those virtual machines in Azure, so that you have that disaster recovery scenario catered for. How am I doing for time? Let's have a quick look. Okay, so about half an hour, so about 15 minutes left. Okay, so which is where I want to be. So from a summary perspective, I say for me, it does stem on requirements. You need to understand your requirements. You need to understand what you can do, how much money you've got to spend, what your business needs are. So step one, in terms of a summary, is outline your BCDR scenarios, and what are your individual system requirements. Again, bring it back again to that RPO, RTO, but retention as well. How do you want to protect your business critical systems compared to, say, your test or your dev systems? Is there a business critical system that can't have any downtime or have very limited downtime compared to one that actually you can? It might be business critical, but it's only business critical in a certain time frame or a certain window. So understanding your estate is key. Understanding the requirements that are generated from that estate are key as well. What I've seen work well in the past, and what is sort of catered for in this in step 2 and 3, 4 here, is establishing a general BCDR approach. So what I mean by that is having a sort of a policy that says, right, okay, anything that we have on-prem, anything that we have in Azure is going to be backed up on a daily basis and retained for 30 days or 50 days or whatever makes sense to you. But it's a general approach, and actually, and you may want to separate out, if it's a production system, it's got to be backed up and retained for a year. If it's a test system, it's got to be backed up and retained for 7 days or 30 days. If it's a dev system, probably about the same. And again, for DR, so, our base RPO, RTO for our systems is going to be 24 hours for our production systems. For dev and test, well, we can probably live with 72 hours a week, or not have an RPO, RTO for those at all. We will just recover them in some fashion when we can. But once you've established that general BCDR approach, then look at how you need to deviate from that for specific individual workloads and to satisfy those individual system requirements. So your baseline is set as within point 2 there, and then point 3 is around how does this then need to change for those specific systems that need something a bit extra. And then step 4 is about implementation. Again, I've tried to tie it back all the time to RPO, RTO, and those sort of technologies that I've spoken about. The table at the bottom there just summarizes that, and where you may want to consider those different types of technology from a DR type perspective. Obviously, there are other reasons as well for using Azure Backup than just RPO and RTO in terms of data retention. And then next steps. So just conscious of time, and want to give you guys a bit of time at the end, just if you want to ask any questions, anything you want to go through in a little bit more detail. At Cloud Direct, we talk to customers all the time around the solutions, around their how they're approaching their use of Azure, and how they, from a hybrid perspective, what they're doing. We're more than happy to come in and have a conversation with you around BCDR, a bit more targeted. It is going to be, those conversations are key because they are dependent on your estate and your individual requirements and how best to apply them. But if there's anything that we can help with, anything you want to discuss in more detail, then please just reach out to us and we can arrange a call.